Ga estyn cwrs o ffynnes I bob un ohonoch chi heno I Lyfrgell Roderic Bowen a campws Camber ar gyfer ail seminar sesiwn hwn o hanes yr eglwys Camber. A diolch I Ruth ac i chi am ddarparu'r stafell yma ar ein cyfer ni. Ond mae'n rhaid y cymdeser arbennig cael cyflwyno parhedig athro Densil Morgan sydd fan hyn ar yn llaw ddeau. A fydd yn hanner ni heno ar gyfraniad canon Robert Camber-Williams i'r Eglwys Gymraeg ac I Gristnogaeth Cymru a ddechrau'r ganrif diwethaf. So as I welcome all of you to the Roderic Bowen Library this afternoon to the second Lampeter Church History Seminar of the session, and on your behalf, thank Nikki and Ruth for setting this room at our disposal. I have to say, I don't need formally to welcome our speaker, since he was until his retirement the Professor of Theology at this university and on this campus. But it is a privilege to welcome on your behalf someone whom I think is Wales's premier theologian. I won't bear his brushes, I think that's true. But theologian he may be, but no ivory tower abstract theologian. Because, as his numerous publications reveal, he's interested in how theology works out in real life, especially in Wales. That means he's a church historian as well, which is even better. And indeed, through which particular Welsh person it's worked out, such as the subject of this evening's seminar, Canon Robert Camber-Williams. Now, for those of us who are ordinands of the church in Wales in the 1960s and 70s, or who had to operate the system as diocesan wardens of ordinands, this is a significant name because of the Camber-Williams exhibition. Because through his wife, he'd inherited a hotel in Llandudno, and the proceeds of sale invested supported ordinands, not me as a post exhibitioner, but others. And I did know that he was a sometime vicar of Lampeter, a member of the chapter of St. David's Cathedral, and he is, in fact, among his fellow canons in that picture in the early part of the last century, and that he was both a mountaineer, I think he was a member of the Alpine Club, and a bicyclist. I don't know where I picked that up from. Of his professional contribution as diocesan missioner, I know and knew less. I know that deficiency will be made up this evening. Densil.
Diolch yn fawr, Wyn. Diolch yn fawr am y gwahoddiad I ddod yma. Since 2021, the Church in Wales, in partnership with St Adam's Institute, has sponsored a series of online seminars mapping the Anglican contribution to Welsh and Welsh language, history and culture from the early modern period to the 20th century. The first series, held in the spring of 2021, began with the early translations of the Bible, the Prayer Book, and the Psalms by William Salisbury, Bishop William Morgan, Edmund Priest, and Dr. John Davies Mallwyd. While the following set of series, 2 per year, have taken the story forward to the establishment of the Church in Wales as a separate province within the Anglican Communion in 1920 and beyond. Thanks to the financial support of the Isla Johnson Foundation, 3 volumes containing these seminar papers, 42 to date, have been published, with a further volume due to be launched at this year's National Eisteddfod in August. The fact that the editing of these volumes, 3 of them to date, Gofal ein Gwynllan, Care for Our Vineyard, the contribution of the Church in Wales to our history and literature. The fact that the editorial work on these volumes has been entrusted to me, a Baptist, and to my colleague, Dr. Camber-Williams, a Congregationalist, is a tribute not only to the ecumenical openness of the project, but it underscores the way in which the Church has contributed so richly to our common heritage and culture. This afternoon's paper is based on a chapter due to be published in volume 4 later this year. And the specific title that I've taken is this: Robert Camber-Williams, The Church in Wales and the Religious Revival of 1904-1905. Let's begin by saying something of his background and early years. Robert Williams, Bob Felyn Fach, was born in Llanystumdwy, Sir Gaernarfon, Carnarvonshire, in North Wales, on the 30th of March, 1860. The son of John Williams, a miller, Bob Felyn Fach, a miller, and Margaret, his wife. He was the youngest of 4 children, 3 boys and a girl, and like his neighbour and younger contemporary, David Lloyd George, he received a thorough elementary education in the local national school, which meant that despite being from a nonconformist home, he was grounded not only in the 3 R's, but in the church catechism as well. When, at the end of his course, Lloyd George left to train as a lawyer, Bob Felyn Fach was appointed pupil teacher. The family were Calvinistic Methodists, and John Williams, the father, a Methodist elder, who was growing increasingly uneasy with the radicalization then taking place among the leaders of his denomination. As a Calvinistic Methodist of the old stamp, he regarded the established church as a bulwark against popery, while his feelings towards Yr Hen Fam, the old mother church, were positive and warm. When the Methodists decided to support the Society for Religious Freedom from state patronage and control, otherwise known as the Liberation Society, with his fellow elders directing chapel members to prevent their children from attending Anglican services, John Williams was mightily perturbed. Under the guidance of a man called David Edwards, the local rector, Bob, for his part, sought confirmation in his parish church. This was around 1875, when he was 15 years old. He remained as an assistant teacher at Llanystumdwy until 1879, and after 6 months teaching in Botwnog on the Llŷn Peninsula, he moved to Bangor to prepare for ordination. As well as falling under the influence of its charismatic dean, Henry Thomas Edwards, H.T. Edwards, he benefited from the fund the dean had established to support prospective ordinands. Under the guidance of Owen Evans, one of the cathedral's sub-deans, he was prepared for the entrance examinations to the University of Oxford. He matriculated from Keble College in 1881. Keble, of course, was a Tractarian college, founded in 1870 to commemorate the contribution of John Keble, who, along with Newman and Pusey, had led the Oxford movement. The movement formed in the 1830s to emphasize the Catholic nature of the Church of England. The Baroque religious tone of Keble College was well illustrated in Holman Hunt's famous painting, The Light of the World, which was hung in the college library when Williams was a student. It's no longer in the library, it's now in the chapel if you want to see it. You probably have seen it as well. But when he was there, it was hung in the library. The fact that H.T. Edwards was, according to his biographer, a broad high churchman, while Keble was a Tractarian college, would characterize Williams's religiosity for the rest of his life. He became a Catholic Anglican and would remain so throughout his career. As at school, he thrived in the university, graduating with first-class honours in theology in 1885 before completing his clerical training with a term spent at the Theological College at Ely outside Cambridge. Ordained deacon by James Campbell, Bishop of Bangor, in 1885, he was licensed to the curacy of St. Mary's in the city, and a year later was ordained priest. He moved to Llandudno parish as curate late in 1886, and there he met Catherine, as we've heard, the daughter of the owner of the George Hotel, and soon they were married. His first incumbency was in Dolwy between Betws-y-Coed and Blaenau-Festiniog in Eryri, where he was inducted in 1887. He would remain there for 9 years until 1896, gaining a reputation as one of the most energetic priests in the diocese. I haven't brought a map with me to show you where Llanystumdwy is, or to show you where Blaenau-Festiniog is, or indeed Dolwy, but use your imagination. It wasn't in Cardiganshire. Let's say a word now, let's move on, and say a word about church defence. Church defence. In addition to his activities within the parish, Williams became active in the increasingly bitter struggle over the disestablishment and disendowment of the Anglican Church in Wales. With the appointment of A.G. Edwards, Arthur George Edwards, is that right?
Alfred.
Alfred. King Alfred, of course, yes. Alfred George Edwards, as Bishop of St. Asaph in 1889, the brother, as it happened, of his old mentor, Dean H.T. Edwards, and a churchman of a very, very, very different stamp. Tensions between Anglicans and nonconformists increased exponentially. And the vicar of Dolwy was ready for the fray. He was appointed lecturer for the Church Defence Society in the Diocese of Bangor in 1889, and soon crossed swords with the redoubtable Evan Jones, minister of Maria Chapel in Carnarvon, and one of the most pugnacious advocates of the disestablishment cause. The nature of their controversy is apparent from the inflammatory pamphlet Dadl Dolwy, the Dolwy debate. That is a respectable name for it, I think, a respectable title, of 1890, describing the altercation in detail, in which each contender gave as good as he got. His short work, Penodau Hanes yr Eglwys yng Nghymru, Chapters of the History of the Church in Wales, 1891, the substance of a series of popular lectures on the nature and antiquity of the Welsh Church, was impressive. He argues strongly in favour of the historical connection between church and state and the validity of its endowments, insisting that the present Welsh Church was in wholesale continuity with the ancient church of the land. Like all high church historians of the period, he emphasized the continuity of the faith through the apostolic succession. That after having been corrupted by the excesses of the medieval papacy, the Reformation had restored the church to its original purity, while the 18th century evangelical revival had been essentially a church-based movement, its members adhering to the mother church of Hen Fam until the unfortunate schism of 1811, when the Calvinistic Methodists ordained their own preachers to administer the sacraments of baptism and the Lord's Supper. I looked in vain for a copy of this book, but I found one, AB Books, and I sent away for it. It was very reasonable, and it came from San Francisco. How it got to San Francisco, I've got no idea. But then I went to the shop which sold it, and there were a load of books, early 20th century Welsh language religious books, in that bookshelf. So we need to sort of some more detective work. How they got there. That was fascinating. Anyway, Williams had served his apprenticeship as an author with a series of essays on religion in the Tudor era, which had appeared in the monthly magazine Yr Hael, the Sun, not like the Sun newspaper, Yr Hael, in 1885, the year he graduated from Keble. From then on, he devoted himself increasingly to historically based popular journalism, challenging the claims of militant nonconformity. Such was the appreciation for his literary work that in 1895 he was appointed editor of the Church Monthly Yr Hael, and he remained in post until 1898. He says something about his link with this college and his subsequent work as diocesan missioner. After 9 years of energetic ministry at Dolwyddelan, he was appointed in 1896 to a lectureship here in St. David's College in Lampeter. Since 1892, the principal had been John Owen, former Dean of St. Asaph, and like Williams, a native of Carnarvonshire, from the village of Llanwestyn in Llŷn. The college's new supplemental charter and the funding that came with it enabled an increase in staff numbers. And it is quite likely that Owen was the one who encouraged his fellow North Walian to apply for the post. The report in the College Gazette stated that they had been appointed, and I quote, to the new lectureship in theology, a gentleman of high academic distinction and of wide reputation in Wales as an able theologian, the Reverend R. Williams, M.A., Vicar of Dolwyddelan, editor of the Hael. As there was already a Robert Williams on the staff, the Professor of Welsh, the only stipulation was that the new appointee should change his name. One of the problems in Wales were either called Davies or Williams or Jones or Evans, and there are so many of them. From then on, he would become Robert Camber-Williams, with the hyphen, as I understand. R.W. Camberensis being the name he used in his early essays in the Hael. Sadly, he and his wife had left behind in the parish cemetery at Dolwyddelan 4 little children. Einion, aged 4, Bronwen, aged 3, Dorothy, 5 months, and Robert Elian, 3 months. Bitter losses all. Despite this, Camber-Williams threw himself energetically into all college activities. In addition to his academic work, he made practical training a priority, advising students on the best way to preach, how to conduct marriage services and funerals, and to engage sympathetically with ordinary people in their everyday lives. Reports in the college column of the Church Weekly, A Fan, show how popular he was, his dedication to Welsh language activities among the students being appreciated especially. The bond between Williams and John Owen was strong. And 3 years later, in 1899, the principal having now become Bishop of St. David's, Camber-Williams was appointed canon missioner in, I think I'm right in saying this, the most extensive diocese in the province of Canterbury. Is that right? It is right, isn't it? I thought so. I'd be a bad church historian if I got that one wrong, wouldn't I? Yeah. He was also inducted as prebendary of, how do you pronounce this, Wyn? Trefloden? Trefloden, yeah, in the cathedral. And thereafter, he would be known as Canon Camber-Williams. He would travel frequently and far afield, establishing societies for sacred study and quiet days for the clergy, but especially with the help of his assistants, Ebenezer Lloyd and Daniel Jenkins, holding week-long parish missions throughout the diocese. In the chapter that I have in the 4th volume, there's more to be said about his really energetic work as a parish missioner after having been appointed to that post. But I want especially to talk now about the Welsh revival. Since early in the century, the 20th century by now, throughout 1902 and 1903 in particular, the spiritual temperature had been rising across the country. And when the final testament of Llywelyn, Dean David Howell of St. David, was published in January 1903, there was a feeling abroad that a spiritual dawn was about to break. Dalia'r sylw, pe gwybyddwyd mai hon yw fy nghenedwri olaf i'n cyd-wladwyr ar hyd a lled Cymru, cyn fy ngwisio i'r farn a goleuni tragwyddoldeb eisoes yn torri droswydd, dyma hi. Mae prif angen fy ngwlad am cenedlanwyl ar hyn o bryd yw adfywiad ysbrydol trwy dywalliad neilltuol o'r ysbryd glân. Take heed. If it were known that this is my last message to my compatriots throughout Wales, before being summoned to the seat of judgment, with the light of eternity already breaking over me, it is this, that the chief need of my dear country and my beloved nation at this time is a spiritual revival through a special outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And those words are to be found on the plaque in St. David's Cathedral, where Llywelyn is buried. The Welsh revival of 1904-1905 has been seen almost exclusively as a nonconformist phenomenon, having little or nothing to do with the established church, a fact of which Camber-Williams was very, very aware. Since 1900, he had edited the St. David's Diocesan Gazette, and he insisted on dedicating 3 issues: January/April 1905, August 1905, and December 1905, emphasizing the fact that the church in Wales not only supported the revival, but had been deeply influenced by it. William Williams of Jeffreyston, Camber's predecessor as canon missioner, was the first to write in the January edition. It is such a mysterious and marvelous movement that no serious-minded man can pass it without much thought and reflection. And again, I will be quoting much more extensively from that essay in the chapter in the 4th volume of this series. But he also says this: all honor to the nonconformists for the efforts they are making in connection with this glorious movement. I have also intimated that the church is not, to say the least, inactive. The same church which has been working in unbroken continuity in Wales from primitive times. Her position and opportunities are unique, but so are her duties too. Bishop Owen penned the article in the August issue, which was equally positive. But the most comprehensive contribution was Camber-Williams's own report of the speech he delivered at the Church Congress The best service I can render is with which we have been lately blessed. Its rise, its workings, the church's share in it, and some of its more obvious lessons. Worldliness, skepticism, the spirit of irreverence had long been at work, along with an intense longing among Christian believers for some quick deliverance. The growing number of parish missions had responded to this, with the missioners increasingly focusing on the doctrine of the Holy Spirit. Llywelyn's last testament, he said, had had an electrifying effect throughout the country. And within months, there were indications that a revival was at hand. The revival, he said, was the reply to the inarticulate but deeply realized sense of spiritual need in the midst of religious decadence. He explained how the movement had begun in February 1904 among the Calvinistic Methodists of New Quay, not far from here, in Ceredigion. And by November, it had manifested itself in the industrial village of Castlwchwr, Lacha, in West Glamorgan. The central figure there was a young working man named Evan Roberts. Soon after he began training for the Methodist ministry at the preparatory school in Newcastle Emlyn. He felt compelled to return to preach among his peers. In appearance, he is tall and somewhat lightly built, with an open, friendly, refined face over which a winning smile spreads. Today, despite all the worldwide fame into which he so suddenly rose, he remains completely simple and humble and natural. It's quite remarkable that you have a Catholic Anglican and a high churchman in the hierarchy of the church saying such positive things about not just the revival, but about Evan Roberts, the coal miner, the young revivalist himself. He then reported on Evan Roberts' mission throughout the Southern Valleys at first, and then to Liverpool and to North Wales, about his assistants, young women and young men, about the crowds and the excitement, and about doubts among experienced believers concerning decorum, over-emotion, and lack of order. It should be remembered, however, that the Holy Spirit works through human instruments and only perfects them in the process. What was striking, however, were the positive effects that the movement had left behind. It soon appeared that the hard materialistic indifference into which the population of the industrial districts was settling had been shattered as by an earthquake. Religion had become the question of the day. Those of the coal mines re-echoed not, as of old, to curses and blasphemy, but to the sound of prayer and the strain of praise. He himself had been invited by the rector of Castlwchwr to confirm the work that was happening in the parish by conducting a special mission, while other clergymen channeled the new spiritual energies into the traditional Anglican forms of worship. The clergy hastened to roll out the melted steel, which was malleable, without stopping to inquire the why and the how that the furnace had become so readily heated. There was not, as far as I know, one parish in the district reached by the revival where special services were not provided, that is, special Anglican services. He went on to describe the nature of these services. The people would be gathered in the schoolroom or in the church hall, and encouraged to share their experiences openly, to announce hymns and to sing them heartily, and to partake in extemporary prayer. This is quite remarkable, coming from a high churchman who revered the liturgy of the prayer book so highly. And then getting them to ask themselves the following 5 questions. Have I given myself completely to God? Do I read my Bible regularly? Do I maintain family prayers? Do I pray for others? Do I do everything I can to bring others to Christ? And the response? We found the people in a wonderful state of spiritual receptivity that we had often longed for and prayed for. This is the diocesan missioner speaking here. We had often longed for and prayed for, but never before experienced. Whole congregations were often in tears, and touching scenes were witnessed as men and women came up to give themselves to God. He hastened to say that on the whole, everything was proceeding in a decorous fashion and in order, with a tight rein being kept on all activities. Guidance on doctrinal and sacramental matters were given in the more formal addresses, with hearers being moved from the church hall to the church building itself. He included his address by emphasizing the need for constant pastoral care for the converted, a better understanding of the concept of conversion in the context of prayer book teaching on baptism and regeneration, and the benefit of witnessing openly to Christ. It would appear that the open confession of Christ is almost a condition of spiritual growth, while hearing such is to others the most helpful encouragement and instruction. Such, he said in conclusion, has been the Welsh revival. Camber-Williams is not the only leading churchman to contribute to the drama of the 1904 and 5 awakening, nor were the industrial areas in the Diocese of St. David's the only places to be touched by it. Examples could be quoted from each of the other dioceses. While Joshua Pritchard Hughes, Bishop of Llandaff, Watkin Williams, Bishop of Bangor, as well as John Owen at St. David's, had encouraged their people to take full advantage of the movement. The evidence and activities of Camber-Williams, however, show how spiritual vigor had revived the Mother Church just as much as it had in the nonconformist chapels. The concluding years. By late 1905, early 1906, excitement was abating, and all indications suggested that the religious life of the nation was settling down to the earlier, to a norm. Now aged 47, he resigned his position as canon missioner and was appointed vicar of Lampeter, a parish familiar to him from his time on the staff of the college a decade earlier. He was happy to return in part because it was there at Caxton Hall, and if I'm right, it's now a kebab shop on College Street, that the Welsh Church Press Company was located. The company that he had done more than anyone else to re-establish in 1897 in order to facilitate the literary mission of the church. It was from there now that the monthly magazine Yr Hael would be published, and he became editor for the second time in 1908, and the Llan, the weekly newspaper, to which he had already contributed so much it would also be published in Caxton Hall. With a cooling of the spiritual temperature, temporal matters came to the fore once more. And following the Liberal victory in the 1906 election, the disestablishment and disendowment of the Church of England in Wales was back on the agenda, with the government appointing a royal commission to examine the matter. Its report, published in 1910, was full of detailed statistics on the state of the church in comparison with nonconformity. And along with Owen Evans, Archdeacon of Carmarthen, he was chosen by Bishop Owen to present the material on the Diocese of St. David's. It became increasingly clear that the church defenders were losing the battle. But this did not prevent Camber-Williams from campaigning vehemently to prevent the inevitable. As well as addressing frequent public meetings, he published a slew of articles in a Llan opposing the political efforts of the nonconformists and offering guidance to his fellow church members. By now, Williams was suffering from intense stress. His wife, Catherine, died in December 1910. And with the passing of the Disestablishment Act in September 1914, a month after the outbreak of the Great War, his health broke down completely. He was forced to resign his living in October 1916, and he retired to Llandudno, his wife's old home. March 1923 was the last time he was seen in public, at the induction of a new vicar in Llanfair Isgair, just outside Caernarfon. According to an observer, he was, and I quote, he was a wreck in body and in mind, and the object of pity to all his old friends. After a protracted illness, he died in March 1924 and was buried in St. Tidno's churchyard on the Great Orme. He was only 64 years old. Robert Camber-Williams, in my opinion, is one of the forgotten heroes of the church in Wales. He was a brilliant, dedicated man with a heart for the church, and especially for its Welsh language culture. He served in both North Wales and South Wales, in the Diocese of Bangor and the Diocese of St. David. He had been the editor of Arhail. For so many years, he was the Omenons Gris of the Llan, founder and main supporter of the newly re-established Welsh Church Press Company. His contribution to the church's literature was immense. Like many of his clerical contemporaries, he has no biographer. He has no entry in the Dictionary of Welsh Biography. And when he died, he had little family and no children to mourn his passing. His final struggle was cruel. If he fought bravely for the temporal interests of the church, he knew that its spiritual state was far more important. It's good, therefore, to remember him this afternoon in the context of the remarkable religious revival of 1904 and 1905.